Hello geographers. Today we're going to talk through a resource analysis question. This question is from the AQA AS paper from 2017. It's from the coastal section. It's a 6-mark Analyse question. So aims from this video to practice your technique for 6-mark Analyse questions and to review some example answers and a model answer. So this question, just to go back over this, is question 2 in section A and section B. It would be question 5 in section C. It will be on both the human and physical paper, and it's an AO3 question. An AO3 question will be testing these skills: the ability to interpret, to analyse, to evaluate data. It's worth 15% of your exam total score from these 3 resource analyse questions. It's really important that you develop the technique and the skill to get full marks. So you're going to come across 2 types of 6-mark analyse questions. The one we're going to look at today is a levelled 6-marker, which means you'll be assessed on whether your answer is clear and level 2, or whether it's basic and therefore level 1. The other type that you'll need to see in a different talk through is where you have to complete a resource. It might be that you complete a stats test like chi-squared or Spearman's rank. You'd get 2 marks for completing the resource and then 4 point marks for your analysis of what you can see. So for exam technique, these are the 4 rules I think you should follow to aim for a level 2 and for the top end of the level 2. So rule number 1 in blue: don't go beyond the resource, and I will prove that to you in a minute. This question is all about AO3. It's not about AO1, your general knowledge. It's not about AO2, your assessment. It is AO3. When you are writing about the resource, you need to comment on the general trends. If you can pick up any ranges or any averages, that will really help. You then need to make sure you've analysed all quantitative and qualitative data you can see, and manipulated data and made connections where possible. And if applicable, it's really important that you consider a short critique of the resource. It might be that there's nothing wrong with the resource and you might pick out anomalies instead, but something where you're thinking in a critical manner. So let's look at applying these rules to the question. So this question shows a map of the United States of America. It's showing the coastal states, and it's showing the density, the number of people who live within 1 metre of sea level. So that would mean these people would be at risk, in theory, if sea levels rose by 1 metre. The colours in the choropleth map: the dark red showing 500,000 and above, the orange 200 to 499,000, and the light yellow 1 to 199,000. So that's the first thing we see. You can also see the names of the states, which are going to be really important in your answer. The other really important element that lots of students miss is the line graph that is showing the projections. It says up here, projections for sea level rise up to 2080. There's a high, an intermediate, and a low. So this question, analyse the information shown in figure 2, is asking me to use everything I can see to describe and interpret the information that's present. So my annotations around this: number 1, I've got to remember to use both graphs. I've then picked out that the risk in terms of number of people living within 1 metre of the sea level is much higher on the east coast, whereas on the west coast it's considerably less. Now, I've added up what that could be to give an estimation, so I'm trying to give a range or an average, a bit of a quantifiable figure, And for the 3 states on the west coast, that number cannot exceed 699,000 approximately, whereas on the east coast it exceeds 2 million. So I'm trying to engage with data and give figures. Another important annotation that I'd be making in my head in the exam is that the highest risk is clearly in Florida and Louisiana. I can't comment exactly on this risk number as it's 500,000 and over, but it certainly shows where the risk is highest. Now, moving into analysis and making connections between these 2 graphs, which is going to be essential for me reaching level 2. First of all, the line graph is showing that for the intermediate and the high projections, risk, so when sea level rise reaches 1 metre, will occur in 2050 for the high prediction and 2080 for the intermediate one. The low prediction doesn't actually ever reach this 1 metre line. The other connection I'm starting to make is that risk could increase in the future, as all predictions show an acceleration or at least an increase in sea level, and in actual fact by 2080 the high estimation would show significantly higher risk than what we're currently looking at the map, because it would be showing approximately 2 metres of sea level rise. Onto the critique, so purple comments. 2 critiques. Number 1, I think the key isn't overly great as these categories are quite large. The difference between 1,000 people and 199,000 people is significant. Therefore, it's very difficult to actually ascertain risk. Equally, if we're saying that this is a number of people who live within 1 metre of sea level, it might be that they live very far inland in the state and not on the coastal zone, and therefore aren't actually at risk. So they're my 2 critiques that make it quite difficult to truly analyse this information. So I'd need to put all of that into an answer, but before I do that, I want to show you the examiner's feedback from this question from the 2017 exam. As you can see, students on average in the country massively underachieved, with the average mark being 2.9 out of 6. That's incredibly low, and shows that at the moment students may not have the technique needed for this type of question, which is why you should learn it. It says here, too many failed to engage with the projections graph and dealt only with the patterns on this map, highlighting the importance of all of these green annotations. We want to make links between whatever we can see. And most importantly, down here at the bottom it says there was no credit for offering reasons for the sea level change or drifting into the potential impact and mitigation management strategies that could be employed in response. The reason this wasn't valued is because it is considered AO1 and AO2. This is application of knowledge and isn't what this question tests. So this is an AO3 question, and it means that you shouldn't be going beyond the resource, which is our blue rule. So the mark scheme, and this might be a really good time for you to pause this video and you can mark the student response below. So I'll talk you through the mark scheme very quickly and then leave you to have a quick assessment of a response. So we're looking out for whether it's clear or whether it's basic. First of all, have a further read of that. And over here, notes for the answer. There's a whole range of bullet points of information that would be valid. So please pause and mark the work. So this student achieved 2 marks, and I'll tell you why. It's considered a basic answer. The student doesn't talk about specific states. They do engage in a basic way with the map. They don't do a very good job at all of linking the map to the projections, although they do make some link to it here. And then, as you can see, big mistake, last sentence. This is due to various causes, but can be specifically but can specifically see a rapid rise of sea level due to human causes, e.g. global warming. This is AO2, possibly some AO1 as well, which isn't being tested. So this student hasn't engaged with the 2 bits of data, certainly hasn't made links, and hasn't used specific details. So hopefully this is a better answer. Once again, please pause to have a read and feel free to consider whether it is a level 2, clear, or level 1, basic. So this answer, I've broken down into colours on the right hand side. So this first section, the choropleth map in figure 2, shows the density of people living below 1 metre above sea level. The line graph shows the projected sea level rise and shows that 1 metre of sea level rise is expected to be exceeded when using the high and intermediate estimates by 2050 and 2080 respectively. That is, within this answer, showing the examiner that you are straight away making links between the data that you can see, and you also understand what it is you're looking at. That is, and does have some elements of general trend and also of using and making connections. The next section is all to do with the general trend and uses specific details. So both of these scenarios would create high risk on the east coast, of at least 2 million people expected to be affected, whereas the maximum number of people on the 3 states on the west coast would be 999,000 people. The states of Florida and Louisiana have an excess of 500,000 people living below 1 metre above sea level and are therefore at highest risk. So that part points out that 2 states are at significant risk. It then moves on and makes some connections between the line graph and the map. So here we go. It should be noted that there is a high degree of uncertainty over sea level rise, and is the low estimate. If the low estimate is correct, the impact to people in coastal states would be significantly lower. So across this answer, in this top section, I've made a point of the high and intermediate projections, and in this green section here made the point that the low projection in the graph might actually mean that the risk that is appearing in this map might actually not be correct. I've then included just one of my criticisms, my critiques. I've called it a criticism, so I'm pointing it out to the examiner. A criticism of this resource is that the term living below 1 metre above sea level is misleading, as they might not live within the coastal zone. Therefore, analysing the risks of the population is very difficult. So, is that a perfect answer? Possibly, possibly not. I've done my best to write it in the time that you would have in the exam. I haven't reviewed the answer, hence the typo that I stumbled over. But it certainly would be considered a clear response, and therefore accessing level 2. It does look for critiques, it covers a great deal of the mark scheme as well, and therefore certainly would be achieving very highly on this type of question.